Florida says good riddance to a terrible 2009, but first we'll review the top power plays and players of the year in this special edition with our guests, Dave Royce of the News Service of Florida and Mike Vasilinda of Capital News Service. Well, the Associated Press surveyed editors across the state who say number one issue for the entire year was Florida's failing economy and record high joblessness for 34 years. It hasn't been that high. What do you think?
Not sure it's fair to say Florida's economy. It's a symptom of the larger national economy, but no question it's the big story of the year. It affects every single policy issue that legislators looked at this past year and that they'll look at in the coming year, from gambling to oil drilling. Everything is about trying to figure out how to find some more money because no tax dollars are coming in.
Has anybody come up with an idea how to right Florida's economy, or are we just going to have to ride this out as a Republican-dominated executive and legislative branch are about cutting taxes, not adding to them?
Well, there's this job summit in early January by the legislative leadership. I'm not sure if that's not just a ploy to say we really need to start drilling for oil to bring some money in. We'll find out when that takes place. The fallout could come, though, is in early January, every business in Florida is going to get a bill that's going to be substantially higher than it was last year because of this unemployment rate, and that could have an extreme impact on the political process and particularly how the governor might be viewed out there.
All right, so 2010 is probably the sexiest political year in modern Florida history, where every statewide race, governor and all three cabinet seats, are up for grabs for the first time ever. Plus, we've got a very sexy U.S. Senate race even on the primary side. How's the economy going to affect all those races?
Well, since you've got all incumbents, it's hard to blame the other guy. I mean, you mostly have incumbents running for, against incumbents. I would say that...
But for higher office.
Correct. But I would say that people will blame the governor for the bad economy, fairly or unfairly. Marco Rubio is there probably going to make an issue of that.
Well, let's go back to Mike's point. The governor didn't create a bad national economy.
Well, but, he's still in charge, and he has been Teflon up until now in terms of his poll ratings, which have started falling mostly because of the uncertainty that he has demonstrated in office. Bob Graham in 1986 ran for the U.S. Senate and was never criticized for the money he raised or for not being on the job. That criticism is already being leveled against Charlie Crist. He needs to find a way to get back to being governor.
Elections are mostly won and lost in short sound bites and quick hits and not in deep looks at who's really to blame and who's not.
Notwithstanding the vaulting ahead that Marco Rubio has surprised everybody with during 2009, to be very competitive and a real threat to Governor Crist. Governor Crist has made a career out of being underestimated, and he seems to always prevail.
I wouldn't sell him short. I certainly wouldn't count him out of this governor's race, and he's got about a 7-1 Senate race, and he's got about a 7-1 fundraising advantage over Rubio right now.
But who comes out in a Republican primary?
Well, I mean, obviously it's the extremes on both the Republican and Democratic side that go out to vote, but I think still Charlie Crist is going to have enough money to motivate middle Republican leadership. He's going to scare them with Marco Rubio.
Well, plus, the governor's office is a pretty good place from which to run for something and to continue to lead to try and address Florida's problems. Let's move on, though, to a real surprise. First-term U.S. Senator Mel Martinez steps down, retires early. Who does that in politics? Where's the fire in the belly? And George Lemieux wins the sweepstakes. Good guy, will always be known as a senator, even if he only serves the 1 year.
Well, Mel Martinez, I think, was a real surprise because he fought so hard to get there.
He ran a nasty campaign
against both his primary and his general election, and then to quit, it's just unheard of.
It is unheard of. What do you think about that?
I think Washington wears you down. I don't think he was prepared for that, and I was surprised, and I think that George Lemieux will always be a senator, like you say, even if he's only a placeholder.
Well, you can bet that Bill McCollum or Betty Castor would not have given up a Senate seat after but one term.
And I would think George Lemieux will be running against Bill Nelson in 2012.
Okay, I think the big story of the year, the darkest clouds politically besides the economy, was the ooze of corruption in state government. The perception of it is as bad as the reality of it in fundraising and contributions. How big a stench did it create over the year?
I think we haven't seen the shoe drop yet. I don't think people have really realized that the FBI has been walking around the Senate office building asking questions about how things get done up there.
And who's wired going into 2010.
And I think that's the fear that everyone up there is going to have, is who's wearing a wire and what's going on up here. The last time I remember the FBI floating around that place was W.D. Childers in 1982. 82, 83 era, and he ended up going before a grand jury and getting cleared. So, you know.
Well, and you know, Ray Sansom, this has never happened in modern history. A speaker removed under a cloud of an investigation, and talk about getting cleared. You know, most of the criminal charges against him have been thrown out after he stepped down as speaker.
But still, a dark cloud follows him around.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think we're going to see the issue with the credit cards, that $170,000+ he spent on the Republican Party tab, and where does that go? I think that all mushrooms.
All right, real quick hit. We ever seen a party chair in either party get vilified the way Jim Greer has been as we end 2009? And can he survive the calls for ouster?
I think this is interesting because it's partly a reflection of a policy difference in the Republican Party. The grassroots people who don't like the sort of the insiders being plugged into positions.
Could be Rubio orchestrated too.
It may be, but what I'm talking about is the sort of the grassroots non-Tallahassee outsiders versus the insiders represented by Chris. That's part of what's going on.
The answer is no, he can't survive. There's big name hitters that were in the paper today saying he needs to go. Next week, every living minority leader in the Republican Party is going to call for his ouster.
And finally, the governor's race is wide open with Bill McCollum and Alex Sink, the front runners in their parties, but nobody has emerged clearly with an advantage at this point.
Well, you know, McCollum has the upside because he's the Attorney General and he inserts himself everywhere. Rightly observed, I'm not sure Alex Sink has gotten out there and tried to do anything but raise money yet.
And on the Republican side, you have, again, this insider-outsider thing going on with Paula Dockery trying to take that outsider mantle and come in and make a race of it on the Republican primary.
And McCollum did not expect that probably at the time a year ago. All right, we're going to go to your respective power plays of the year for 2009. And we'll start with you, Dave Royce.
My power play is Governor Christ, and particularly his decision to forego a second term and run for the U.S. Senate because of the effect it had on the political landscape in Florida. It's going to shake up the entire makeup of the cabinet and the House and Senate seats that'll change hands because he decided to switch streams.
And Mike?
State Farm Insurance and the way the state handled them for the entire year, 800,000 customers of State Farm didn't know if they were going to get insurance anywhere in Florida or at what cost. They were kept on the string all year long, and at the end of the year, they settled with a 15% rate hike.
And I'm going to go with, despite their economic challenges, the Florida Press Corps, which continues to be aggressive and to try to ferret out the truth, even in a tough economy for them and their corporate mothers and fathers. Thank you, Dave Royce. Thank you, Mike Vasalinda. Happy New Year to both of you, and Happy New Year to you. And we hope that all your power plays in 2010 are good ones. Go to the Safety Review for the latest political news, and we'll see you next year on Power